his children's ears, who paused their aimless, frivolous play and listened to what this white man had to say. And men who'd known but curses and lies stood waiting for another alibi. So the general once more cleared his throat as the crowd controlled its glee, and he said, "In case you did not hear, from now on you are free." Just then, an old man plodded through the grumbling crowd on a worn-out, crooked cane, and he said to the general and his soldiers, "Sir, could you say those words again?" And tears welled up in that tough soldier's eyes as his audience he surveyed, and with a breaking voice he replied, "Good friend, you are no more a slave." The old man, the old slave, looked out over the land that once had held him fast, and he said, "Now, sir, you would not kill a man whose best days are long since past." A crusty sergeant scratched his skull and spat a gob of spit. He said, "You're free, old fool. You heard the man. Now grab your goods and get." But the feeble man, who was slave-born, refused just then to move, as if the ground he stood upon insisted this lie be proved. So the old man spoke with an ancient voice like a Moses man of old, and though the day was early bright, the morning still was cold. And he looked that white man straight in the eye, who wore a Union suit, and he measured that man for truth or a lie with his dusty riding boots. Then he said with a voice that was somehow young and was filled with a young man's dreams, "Sir, would you be so kind to tell me now what this here freedom means?" The general cocked his hat to the side and he thought for a painful while. Then he gazed at the old man blocking his way, and he gave him a brotherly smile. He said, "From now until you die, whatever you may do, if you should wish to run or fly, that choice is up to you." And the old man grinned his ragged mouth, his gums as white as bone, and he winked at the general with bloodshot eyes, and he asked, "Which way is home?" "I'm talking about the place from whence I came. That's what I long to see," he said. "And if you would please tell me now where Africa ought to be. Is it east or west? Is it north or south? How many miles from here? And if I start out on my own, would my journey be far or near?" And the general removed his riding gloves, and he pointed in the air, and he answered the man who stood still as death, "I think Africa is over there. Due east," he pointed, "over those hills, across an endless plain, and an ocean awaits that you must swim before you reach home again." And said, "Thank you," kindly, lifted a sack on the shoulder sharp as bone. Then the old man said to whoever might hear, "Good folks, I'm going home." In silence he wheeled on worn down heels, and down an empty lane the old slave walked with a free man's legs, for to find home once again. "To Africa!" they heard him shout as he hobbled out of sight, and many are the ones who have no doubt he sleeps at home tonight. In the Texas town of Galveston, to everyone he saw, on behalf of the United States, General Granger brought the law. Some say it was the 19th day in the summer month of June. He repeated what Lincoln had to say, and he said it none too soon. So may everyone who has heard his words and who wears a sable face remember Emancipation Day that freed an entire race.
Wow, man. That's good. That's good. That's powerful there.
I came to drink.
Oh, well. You just excuse me for a minute, brother. I mean, that's really powerful. That's saying something there. And I thank you so kindly, brother, for those beautiful words. And I'm showed us like I was moving. People, freedom-minded people, welcome those two. It was our day. Now you look and see what's happening in the Middle East. Over 100 and some people died in Syria yesterday, and thousands of others people suffering for freedom, justice, and equality. So this is something that affects all of humanity. So on my other note, I would just like to say is that the emancipation, the question I would ask was, did the Emancipation Proclamation free us? President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on September the 22nd, 1862, notifying the state and rebellions against the Union that if they did not cease their rebellions and return to the Union by January the 1st, 1863, he would declare their slave forever free. Needless to say, the proclamation was ignored by those states that seceded from the Union. Furthermore, the proclamation did not apply to those slave-holding states that did not rebel against the Union. As a result, 800,000 slaves were unaffected by the provision of the proclamation. It would take a civil war to endorse the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution to formally outlaw slavery in the United States.
You know, the word ignore is a very, very fascinating word definitively. You cannot ignore a truth whose time has come. You may not move on it. No one may see you do anything or say anything at all, but deep in the center of your soul, you have not ignored it. When the Emancipation Proclamation was read and heard, the South went through a tremor. It was never the same. It has never been the same. And we have to thank Abraham Lincoln for at least the thought which created the word, which caused an entire world to review how it responded and interacted with its own brothers and sisters.
Right. Let me go now and move the conversation along right to where you brought it. Emancipation Proclamation. I'm gonna go to Sister Cunning right now. What concerns me, I heard that point, and thank you so much, Professor, for that, was that the slave, our slave ancestors, he still had the yearning to be free. That's what we missing today. Because with that Emancipation Proclamation, Sister Cunning, there was nothing put with that to make sure and to ensure a smooth transition into freedom. The saying went that they just ran out the plantation. The Freedmen's Bureau, all of the things that was set up to help a people that had built this country for 438 years, 300 some years at that time. What is really the true meaning is the Emancipation Proclamation? What, in your own thoughts, what should have been done after the reading of that?
Well, you know, before, you know, I would give Lincoln any credit whatsoever, I would have to give credit to the work of Brother Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, all of the freedom fighters, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, all of them that forced his hand, because it was the work of the slaves from the point of being kidnapped that had made a decision that they wasn't going to be slaves for the sisters that jumped overboard. You know, the lack of confidence of having an understanding of what this government represents is what has led to what you say, this disconnect of disbelief. Because at the moment Lincoln is saying you're free, he says in the same breath, I have no desire to end slavery. I want to save the Union. And so all of the pieces that's supposed to have been put in place to ensure that we have equal footing left immediately. The 13th Amendment was written that said that individual white people couldn't own us, but the government could. If you create a crime, you become state property. Right. Look at one of your transcripts when it says the state versus you, if you got a court date. And that's how it's played out. We have never been given the reparation for the 400 years of work, of labor. We have never been even given an opportunity that became equalized in America. So that's been one of the greatest deceptions.
Okay, let's go right now to Kwamina. I want to ask you, Kwamina, when you think about this, how you think that we should celebrate this. One of the things that you're big on is the panel of elders, where our children can really know what went down. Should we have celebrations where we have a panel of elders to talk about this, the significance of our being free, so that we can value this freedom? How do you think we should celebrate? You know, it's the way that we celebrate Kwanzaa. But what is the true way to celebrate a Freedom Day?
I believe a true way to celebrate a Freedom Day is to tell the stories. We have been shunning telling our stories, again, as I said from the beginning, because it's such a horrific tale. If I might piggyback on what you and Sister Connie were talking about, the emancipation was on paper. The 40 acres and a mule would have definitely gone to help further an economic development for these newly freed enslaved people. But because we didn't get that, as we didn't get the GI Bill, many of us after World War II, and therefore the equity and the homes that were passed on to the next generation of children after that, the stories have not been told. So from 1619 to now, we need to tell the tale and not be afraid of the telling. Tell it with all of its victory as well as all of its horror, because the one thing our children or the descendant generations think about our enslavement, that it was all horrific, that we had no victories. But as Sister Connie said, if it wasn't for Denmark Vesey, if it wasn't for Nat Turner, if it wasn't for Harriet Tubman, if it wasn't for so many others who were unnamed, who took a stand. I was watching a poet recently who talked about the incident of Malcolm was not as correct about his description of the house Negro versus the field Negro, because in the house they put a little something in the master's food when they got tired of the master's mess. So it would be to mix a little poison in with the food and say, "Come taste this, mistress." So a lot of was done, and our stories haven't been told, that our youth and our families and our friends don't think that we have the power like we did then now.
All right, let's go now. We talk about this significance of Juneteenth, and we got our producer want to ask a question.
Yeah, I was waiting for the professor to get back, the doctor to get back in the studio.
No, he's gone.
He's gone for that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the question I wanted to ask, prior to Lincoln proposing the proclamation, he got together a group of Negro leaders at that time and proposed territory in South America, because he knew the outcome of this Emancipation Proclamation, and the Negro leaders at that time turned down this territory in South America. And I was just curious, you know, if we really wanted freedom and wanted to be independent, why did the Negro leaders turn down this territory at that time?
All right, who want to take that on the panel?
Colonialism is insidious. And the one thing that was not freed were our minds. So you can give a man his physical freedom, but after, and we're talking up until this point, 12 generations of enslavement. If we're going to count a generation by 20 years, we had experienced 12 of them enslaved on this continent. You cannot give a person his freedom without first returning him to his native tongue, returning him to what his concept of freedom was, how he believed, how he spoke, what he ate. You can't take an enslaved mind and set it free, because it won't go anywhere.
All right, let's go Hakeem the Dream. We're talking about the significance of Juneteenth celebration. What you got, Dream?
Okay, the question I would ask is, why is Juneteenth celebrated? It symbolized the end of slavery. Juneteenth has come to symbolize that for many African Americans, that the 4th of July symbolized for all American freedom.